I've reached the age where I have an excuse for my bad memory. I have to do the Academy Award thing first, and thank everybody because I had a ton of help getting here. I was really lucky to be brought up in the secularist movement. All of my 4 immigrant grandparents were secularists. So I would like to thank my family. If you are a member of my family, please stand up and remain standing. Except if you're pregnant, then you don't have to stand up. But when I was commuting here every week for a year, I stayed with a lot of people, and I ate dinner with a lot of people, and I took walks and got moral support from a lot of people. If you are those people, please stand up and remain standing. Get up. Mike and Ruth, I see you there. Stand up. If you were one of my wonderful co-students in a class, or if you were my teacher, or if I was your teacher, or if we were together in a seminar room one time at a CSJO conference or a leadership conference, stand up. This is good. If you are a member of the Jewish Cultural School and Society in Ann Arbor, my home congregation, please stand up. This is really cool. If you are a supporter of this institute, please stand up. And now, for my first rabbinic act, Lonnie, you will be proud of me. You may be seated. Thank you. Sherwin actually stole my speech. I wanted to talk about those things that are important to me, so I probably will anyway. What's important to me as a Jew are the things that I make central to my work. That is community, history, culture, and social justice. So instead of a speech about those things, I want to combine those 4 elements into a communal cultural event, drawing on history and expressing social justice. In one rabbinic class, we were reading Mishnah, early rabbinic writings from around the turn of the era, and I came across this. The more wives, the more witchcraft. The more maidservants, the more lewdness. But it went on, the more justice, the more peace. Marbe tzedakah, marbe shalom. It was a great lesson in our history that there's good and bad intermingled, and we have the responsibility to choose the parts of our heritage that are good and progressive and to add to those. So, coming from a good Jewish lefty background, I felt an immediate affinity for that social justice sentiment. And I particularly liked the formation because it takes the kind of same rhythmic form as what Chaim Zhidlovsky, who was one of the early founders of our movement, said, Vos mer Yid, als mer Mensch, vos mer Mensch, als mer Yid. The more Jewish, the more human. So I took the words from the Mishnah, I set them to music, that's the culture part, and I would like you to sing the song with me, and that's the community part, and you have just been proving that you can sing. So I know you can learn this song. You already know 2 of the 3 words in it. You know the word shalom, peace. You know the word tzedakah, justice. And all you have to know is the word marbe, the increase of. When you hear reb in a Hebrew word, it has to do with bigness. So the words are like this. You can say them after me. Marbe tzedakah. Marbe shalom. Okay, you got it. Now, here's what you're going to do, and it's a round. And I'm going to teach you the second part first. In honor of our dear friend Marcia Method. Some of you knew never this person. So the second, there are people in the audience actually laughing.
ערב טוב, קהל נכבד. שמי סיוון מלקין מאס. Okay. Okay, we're going to do it again. ערב טוב, קהל נכבד. שמי סיוון מלקין מאס, ואני רב חילוני. I'm standing here tonight with my family who came with Israel. I cannot sing, but I can show you my family. Nitzan? Nitzan is 16 years old, Tomer is almost 10, and Danielle is 6. Thank you for coming up here. The other part of my family is Yiftach, who's standing right over there. He's my husband. And Yiftach is doing something very important tonight besides being my husband. And that is that he's holding a camera that we got from Channel 2 in Israel. Channel 2 is interested in having a Friday night Yoman, which is the most important news time in Israel, about this ordination. They gave him the camera, and that's why he's filming. So if he comes up to you with questions, please answer him. What do you need secular rabbis in Israel for? Israel is a Jewish state. You can feel the culture in the air. Friday is felt just by walking down Emek Rephaim in Jerusalem, and if you haven't done it, you should. Or by walking down Shenkin in Tel Aviv, and again, if you haven't done it, you should. Or in any other place that gets ready for Shabbat. For Rosh Hashanah, the stores get filled with honey and apple products. For Pesach, stores cover up the chametz products, and bookshops sell many Haggadot, some new ones, some traditional ones. Hebrew is spoken by most. Schools teach literature, poetry, history, and Bible. So why do you need Jewish rabbis? Why do you need Jewish leaders who are qualified educators and professional community leaders who can officiate and create Jewish secular ceremonies? Well, if the grass is green, why water it? Well, the reality of Israel is there's hardly any grass, and it's mostly not green. We take for granted much too much. People will lose their sense of identity and develop in one or two ways. Some small minority may return to what they thought is the right way to be Jewish, which in Israel usually means the Orthodox way. Or they will grow more and more ignorant, less and less Jewish. I asked parents of my children's friends, what do they do on Friday night dinner? All three of my children study in public schools in Jerusalem. And I got an answer which I really did not expect. And the answer was that over 50% of those people told me that they don't have Friday night dinners. Now, this was not a reality for me growing up in Israel. Everybody had a Friday night dinner. Now, what you did during Friday night dinner may differ, but everybody had a Friday night dinner. Well, reality is not like that anymore in Israel. Excuse me. But most preferred to do something with their family, but felt that the traditional kiddush is not relevant to their way of life, and creating something new sounded too difficult for them. Walk into most Israeli junior high schools and high schools in the major cities, and you will not know there is a holiday in sight. That is new. Celebration is perceived as infantile. It's good for kindergarten children and elementary school teachers. It did not used to be that way. While I was working on Kibbutz Ramat Rachel, I saw firsthand how the incredibly rich cultural and educational past experiences get buried in the kibbutz archive. I have worked hard to generate new interest in Kabbalot Shabbat, bar and bar mitzvah celebrations by empowering their leaders to take action and create first steps towards change and renewed will and enthusiasm to celebrate Judaism. While I was working as a director of a community council in Jerusalem, I initiated a program to get secular and religious youth to meet each other and discuss various issues. After a short time, I realized that the secular group was reluctant to meet with the religious one, and I didn't understand why. The madrich told me as follows: we are unsure of who we are and what it is to be Jewish, so we just end up arguing politics. We need to learn more about and experience more for ourselves what it really means for us to be secular Jews in Israel. The reality is that over the past decade, the number of Israeli couples getting married abroad has multiplied by 10. About 10% of couples getting married every year in Israel get married abroad. In other words, not an Orthodox, not a Jewish wedding. And that is quite a number for Israel. It is 6,700 people every year that don't get married in Israel, because the only legal marriage in Israel is an Orthodox one. Even though that is the situation, 3,500 Israeli couples were married in Israel in alternative non-Orthodox weddings. 2,000 got married with a contract without any ceremony. 1,000 couples got married by Reform rabbis, 300 by conservative rabbis, 200 by contract and ceremony. That does not include the kibbutzim. That does not include 50 other weddings that I know about that were made by a new secular organization. In addition, over the past decade, an organization by the name of Menucha Nechona had won several Supreme Court rulings which resulted in opening the first Jewish secular cemetery outside the kibbutz or a moshav near Be'er Sheva. Ground have been designated in Chulon, which is near Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem. Someone should be out there collating the work that has already been done over several decades by the kibbutzim movement and many other initiatives, compiling and creating relevant ceremonies for those different holidays and life cycle events which I mentioned. As you can understand, there is a growing need for dealing with aspects of daily life positively, not only by determining what is wrong with the system and finding ways to battle it, but to create alternatives for those growing numbers of Israelis who lost connection with their heritage because the religious solutions that are out there do not seem relevant to them. I will not be creating something out of nothing. Rather than highlighting what seems obvious and mundane to many Israelis, enabling people to recognize and celebrate their Jewishness, something they can pass on to generations. This is a break. Even most of God's work, as described in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, is creation by separation and definition. Now hold on, I don't dare compare myself to God. But on the other hand, I always remember what my grandfather, Dov Bermalkin, who used to say to me every time I seemed to belittle my thoughts. I was about 6 then. He said, "Do not make yourself so small. You are not that big." It's very useful. Parashat Bereshit is usually read on Simchat Torah and the week immediately following, which usually falls in September. But this time, since we have just come off a leap year, we read Bereshit in late October. What does this Torah reading have to do with me becoming the first secular Israeli rabbi? What does the order of the Torah portion have to do with what is happening to Jewish culture today? Wait and see. As you recall, one of the major tools used to create the world was defining by separation the entities in the universe and giving them names. On the first day, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from darkness. On the second day, God made the expanse, and it separated water which was below the expanse from water which was above the expanse. And it was so. God called the expanse sky, which in Hebrew works much better. It is called Shamayim, Sham-Mayim. On the third day, separation by boundaries. Let the water below the sky be gathered into one area, that the dry land may appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called the seas. On the fourth day, God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate day from night, to separate light from darkness. On the fifth and sixth days, living things were created out of their habitat and limited to their surroundings, be it water, sky, earth, including man in the image of God. Even though God separated the days from the nights, he did not name them. The storyteller counts the day from the initial creation of light up to the creation of man in his image. At this point, we are told in the story, on the seventh day, God finished the work that he had been doing, and he ceased on the seventh day from all work that he had done. Separation and definition by name is not sufficient for identity and content. It is not until the book of Exodus that we first encounter the noun Shabbat, used as a name of the seventh day. The creation of humanity and the special meaning of Shabbat has just begun at this point. Only in the story of Exodus from Egypt, we learn the social, ethical, humanistic meaning of the creation of Shabbat, which were pointed out by Professor Yuda Bauer last night. A lot had happened before the Shabbat was defined, in other words, separated, sanctified, and differentiated as a day of rest for all humanity, living things, and the spiritual entity. Creating a state is in many ways creating a world, separated by boundaries from other similar but very different sovereign cultures and societies. The task of reviving the Hebrew language in the 19th century was maybe one of the first attempts to encounter the meaning of sustaining and at the same time creating this new culture. Separating the renewed Israeli cultural identity from hundreds of years of Jewish cultures in which Hebrew was not used as a common spoken language amongst Jews. The Shabbat is of paramount importance. It reflects humanistic, social, and ethical values, revolutionary at the time and worth fighting for even today. Therefore, all the other days, being plain weekdays, are separated from the Shabbat and are identified by their proximity to Shabbat. Creating a language, dreaming up and creating new institutions, was and still is a way to define our Jewish Israeli culture. Relating to Jewish traditions in creating a vibrant Israeli culture influenced by folklore of originating states of its immigrants and defined by Zionist ideology and practicum is still today the common denominator of our culture. Just listen to Israeli music, from Kaveret to Idan Reichel's new songs, the choreographers of Bat Sheva, Bador, the kibbutzim dance companies, Israeli theater from Hanoch Levin to Rina Yerushalmi, so much relates even today to biblical texts as part of our current culture. Look at the Israeli Acropolis. As Dr. Reutemann points out, how did the ideology of the Zionist movement manifest itself in the creation of its government and fundamental institutions, which were built from 1950 on Givat Ram in the western part of the city, separating itself from the entities in the eastern part. As we speak, the new government buildings and the Prime Minister's new home is being built today on the same hilly area. Many of these institutions define themselves in connections with our heritage. How? They call themselves temples. Listen to this. Mishkan HaKnesset, our parliament is called Mishkan. The Shrine of the Book, which was the first building to open in the early 60s in the Israeli Museum. The Hebrew University was referred to by its founders as the third temple. Not one in which prayer and sacrifice would be performed, but where study and the new Israeli culture and science will be developed. Betzalel, the art academy, which served as also the foundation of the Israeli Museum, was referred to by its founder, Betzalel Schatz, in 1906 as Israel's new temple. As any good midrash will ask, well, what's missing on that Givat Ram, the Acropolis, where all the government, the museum, etc., is there? Should I leave you with this question and hope that you will return from the community's miracle mission to Israel, inspired and enlightened with new insight of Israeli culture? You see, a shlicha is always a shlicha. Well, there are no religious institutions in sight. Creating our national and cultural identity with a renewed language, education system, and institutions that relate to our tradition, but separate from its ancient location, is a way to keep tradition alive and relevant. For decades, Israeli culture is a pluralistic one. Most of the population in Israel lead a secular way of life and do not belong to any congregation. Talking about words, do you realize that in Hebrew, there is no word for congregation? There is word for community. There is no word for congregation. Why is that? When we read the numbers, as we heard from Felix Posen earlier today, we realize that the most of the Jewish population does not observe traditional Judaism. This is stating a fact. It is not describing a state of mind. To change that, some successful initiatives in education have been taken place with the support of the Posen Foundation in universities, colleges, and schools that already created a positive snowball effect. People in Israel are not necessarily conscious choice makers about their Judaism. And if they are, it is usually about what not to do rather than to be proactively positive. Now, I believe is the time to create excellent Israeli leadership. Develop Israeli alternatives, not one, but many. Defined by positive action, the mundane from the worth celebrating, based on a renewed approach and reality in which people do not give up their ideology and seek new alternatives for celebrations of holidays and life cycle events. Not only don't we have to invent new secular humanistic Judaism, we need but to revive a Zionist tradition of celebrating Judaism as has been done by the kibbutzim movement, educational institutions, and in recent years, new initiatives. History takes its course. As secular communities in Israel are looking for ways to redefine themselves and individuals to celebrate their Judaism, I find myself, once more, bringing people from this exceptional community of Detroit and the people of Israel together. Not by copying what has been done here, which is relevant to the people here, but by supporting and developing Israeli initiatives. About 10 years ago, I came to Detroit as an emissary from Israel, representing Israeli people. I am honored and grateful that friends from different denominations and congregations came here tonight to be with me and my family. I thank you. I was surprised to see this congregation at the time, but over the years, studying and working in Israel, I realized that many similar things are happening in Israel, but not in an organized and professional manner. I believe we have much to learn from each other. Each hand is separate and different from each other. But we could not, if they were not separated, How could we clap them together? I would like to thank Rabbi Sherwin Wine, who decided I would become a rabbi long before I even knew that. You have shown me what vision, bound with professional insight and determination, can do. It is important for me to recognize Rabbi Colton and Rabbi Shalom for their support and effort to include me in their busy schedules. I would like to thank my exceptional friend, a first-class artist and a very wise person, Felice Posner-Malkin, that made masterpieces of culture my personal friends, my mother. And my rabbi and mentor, Professor Malkin, who inspired and taught me Jewish thinking and creativity, bounded in responsibility to community and Israel. Toda rabba, Leshana haba'a b'Yerushalayim. Please say with me, Leshana haba'a b'Yerushalayim.